podcast where we review horror movies just like we do every night, right, Cecilia?
Right.
And yeah, just a couple of gal pals doing their thing.
When I die, bury me deep. Lay 2 speakers at my feet. Put some headphones on my head and rock and roll me when I'm dead. And that is the opening scene to the movie Mandy, which released just last year.
Yeah, and it's directed by this Panos Cosmatos, and you can find this movie on Shudder. So Mandy.
Mandy was a very strange and dark film. I would kind of call it maybe a slasher
Thriller.
It had a lot of violent moments, a lot of striking visuals.
A lot of striking visuals and great use of color. That was a very, very interesting color palette, or actually various color palettes going on in that movie. But yeah, do you wanna say what it was about, or would you like me to say it?
So Mandy has a very classic story where, well, are we allowed to do spoilers?
Well, I guess we could. I mean, well, we'll try to be minimal about it. But if you want, I could say it. We'll try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this movie stars Nicolas Cage. I know, Nicolas Cage, but hear us out on this. Nicolas Cage plays a character named Red Miller, and alongside his wife, who is played by Andrea Riseborough, who plays his wife named Mandy. They live alone in the woods. You know, it's like really peaceful, and it's like a cute little wood house and stuff like that. But they're really in love. I mean, like, he loves her so much, and you can kind of see that when, especially in the opening scene, because the main character Red Miller, he is like a woodsman. Yeah, or he owns like a lumber company or something. And that opening scene where he's on the job is just, the color palettes are dead. They're pretty cold. And then and once he gets home to his wife Mandy, like it's just like you just feel that love. It's like the color palette even changes. It's really warm and homey, comfortable. But suddenly all that is taken away when this crazy cult just like comes into their lives and just takes everything away from this character. And it kind of just spirals on from there.
And at its heart, Mandy is definitely a revenge story.
Mm-hmm.
We have a first part which sort of is slower than the second part.
Yeah, it's kind of like an introduction to the characters, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like it really makes you care for Mandy and Red.
And Mandy's definitely the main character during the first half
I mean,
of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, the way they styled her was, like, what really made it for me. She has, like, this, like, crazy long black hair, like, you know, this movie takes place in, like, what year was it, 1983?
1983.
Yeah. So she has, like, still has, like, this long straight hair, like, from the 70s, you know, like a 70s type of feel, and she's wearing all these crazy awesome metal shirts, like Black Sabbath and Motley Crue, and she just has like this really like neat metal style to her, and just like with these huge eyes, you know, and like what did you say she had? She had
otherworldly appearance.
Yeah, like an ethereal being almost.
She kind of there was this one scene where she was coming out of the water and her eyes were just crazy, and she kind of reminded me of like a fae or an elf.
Yeah.
Look to her.
Yeah, and especially in that dream sequence where she's like in the woods and she finds like that baby deer.
Mm-hmm.
It really captures that fantasy feel to it. Yeah, so another interesting thing I found about this movie was it was structured in chapters. Like, it had title cards, which was really cool to me, and like each chapter had like its own style. Like the first chapter was called Shadow Mountains, and it had like this really pretty sparkly calligraphy to it. It was really nice. I like that. It was definitely something different.
And the second part was called Children of the New Dawn. And I'm supposing that's the name of the cult?
Yeah, yes, I believe so. Children of the New Dawn, and they're our main antagonist. Is this in this aside from the creepy monsters that are in it?
Which we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about the cult leader, Jeremiah?
Yeah, definitely. He is an interesting character. I want to say the actor who plays him, he did a really, really good job in portraying this completely insane character. But his name is Jeremiah, and he believes that he is a god, as well as you expect of all cult leaders. But he's just like really full of himself. I want to say he's like super arrogant. He literally does believe he's a god. And yeah, the whole basis of this cult is just like
that they're gonna ascend.
Yeah, they're gonna ascend to like a higher power, or
that they're the chosen ones.
Yeah, the chosen ones. And the way they initiate, I believe, is like what they did to Mandy.
Yeah, drug him up.
Yeah, like a whole LSD trip going on. Yeah, his cohorts were very interesting, I guess. That one lady, what was her name? Marlene?
Marlene, yeah.
Yeah, she was like insane. I think he calls her a chemist because she's the one that like, drugs people up with LSD and they get stung by like this weird wasp thing. I'm not sure what was that about, but I'm guessing it enhances a euphoric feeling about it, and that's kind of like the feeling you get when you watch this movie too. It's like you get like this weird ecstasy feeling, even though we've never done ecstasy or drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. Anyway, yeah, it had like this very dreamlike ecstasy feeling to it, like very giving that hippie drug feel of like the 1970s. But yeah, that was Children of the New Dawn, just like very disconnected from reality.
And then we get to the final section of the movie, which is the title, Mandy. And I found it really cool how the title was kind of reminiscent of metal bands.
Yeah, it had like the especially death metal logos. It's really neat. So like if you guys like metal, you might like this movie because it's very, very metal. Trust me. And that third chapter is where it really takes off. Chapter 2 was very intense when it starts speeding up. Because the cult does kidnap Mandy. She's all drugged up in this, and that brings up one of my few favorite intense scenes was where Jeremiah was giving his monologue. It's just like, it's very intense. Like the entire time that he's doing this monologue, it's just like straightforward, and he's just going on and on about how he is the chosen one, and going on about religion and like he puts on this Carpenter song, but I don't know the name of it.
Jeremiah Seed?
Jeremiah Sand or something like that?
Something like that.
It's something along those lines, but he's basically going on like how he created, like the song is about him and that he created this song or whatever. And in reaction to that, like Mandy's just like completely, going off on like this, like an LSD trip. She has no idea what's going on and she's completely dazed. And then she starts laughing after this guy takes on this long monologue. And I actually found that part kind of funny because she's just laughing and her like it deeply hurt his feelings.
Yeah, especially with all of his followers around him.
Yeah, and what it made even funnier is that like he took off his robe in front of her, like trying to seduce her or something. So like it's like complete frontal male nudity warning, guys. But it was kind of funny.
And okay. I mean, this guy already has 2 women on his little harem he has going on, trying to add Mandy to it as well, but Mandy's not having any of it.
It won't be his or her red bear, man. Her red bear. It's only for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that part was kind of funny, because he was like upset and humiliated her. He humiliated him. I mean, yeah. So there's that, and then like it just cuts to Red where he's like tied up, and that's another thing we have to point out too, is that there's a lot of religious symbols going on in this, like especially the way Red was captured. He was tied up to, what was he tied up to? Like a tree or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was tied up with like barbed wire, like gagged with barbed wire like across his mouth, and like His wrists were tied with barbed wire as well. And yeah, that's where the intense part happens, but I won't spoil what happens there. All I can say is that things don't turn out good for Mandy for laughing.
Yeah.
That's all we can say.
But that's where we go on to the second part where Red takes over
Yeah.
the movie and he becomes the main character and he goes on his little revenge trip against everybody who wronged him.
And there's a lot of important points in that intense moment. But it's a lot of very good camera work is what I have to say for that. Very good storytelling. But yeah, to that point, Red just like frees himself from the barbed wire with his own blood, and trust me, that was painful. Like I cringe just looking at it or just remembering it. But he goes home, and the TV is still on. He turns on the TV like he has no idea what just happened. And like there's this weird commercial going on there that I remember. It's like this goblin, like
Cheddar Goblin.
Yeah, cheddar goblin, just like a weird commercial, and it's like this goblin puking macaroni and cheese on top of these children.
Yeah.
These children are laughing. I'm guessing it's supposed to be comedic relief from that intense moment.
For me, it felt kind of jarring to just finish watching this scene that was so horrible, and then just seeing this dumb commercial.
Yeah.
With this cheddar goblin just vomiting up macaroni.
Large quantities of macaroni, I might say.
And like it continues, and he walks into the bathroom, and this bathroom's completely orange, and it's
like,
just ugly.
With like these flowers on like tile. It was like insanely, like it hurt my eyes.
And he's like in his undies, like
drinking vodka and pouring it all over his wounds.
When screaming his head off and just having a moment.
Yeah. I know that a lot of other reviewers and critics said this was supposed to be like a comedic point because like, oh yeah, he's in his tidy whities and he's screaming his head off and pouring vodka all over himself. But honestly, I didn't really find it funny, I guess, because this was like his wife is gone and he can't bring her back, and it's like this moment of solace, like because like when you go in the bathroom, like to have a moment for yourself, and it's just like him letting out all of his grief at once, like all of this pain and just letting loose of everything that just happened. That's what I saw.
It just added to the chaos of everything that happened, and I guess it would be kind of dark humor. Yeah, I suppose. Without the laughs. Yeah, but I love dark humor. Like, you know, I say dark humor, you know, with you guys all the time, but it's, I don't know. It's like, I didn't see any dark humor in that. But I suppose to some people it is. But that was a very interesting scene. And that really was really impactful, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so there was that moment, and the biker guys. Oh, the biker guys. The main villains. The Black Skulls. The main powerful villains. Yeah. So, there's not that much lore in this story about them. Yeah. It's very minimal. Just enough to kind of build the sort of scariness that surrounds them. But nothing too deep. And which I think works for the movie because it makes them even scarier to me that there's not enough information about them. But most of the information we get about the Black Skulls is coming from a friend of Red's. Yeah. Yeah, a friend of Red's. He's also the one that gives him the main weapon that he uses to, you know, enact his revenge. Yeah, he basically said that these guys were like these really big, tough biker dudes. I mean, like, they were brutal until they were given like this weird powerful concoction, some LSD, and like after just taking a little bit of it, they were never the same again, like never, and just turned into like these crazy power fueled murderers in a sense. Yeah. And I think they were absolutely awesome. I mean, their design, they reminded me a lot, as soon as I saw them, it reminded me a lot of Hellraiser, the monsters in that movie. Yeah. Like, there was one that looked kind of like Pinhead. Yeah, I did. I saw a lot of those references, and I thought they were really interesting, especially how they were set up. Because, like, this movie uses a lot of color, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But
Yeah, it was just really cool because like you never see like a full detail of these characters. You either get a glimpse or like really fast shots of these. It's just to keep that mystery to them. And yeah, they were just really cool. Also, might I say, the Black Skulls would make an awesome band name. I'm just saying.
It would.
And so yeah, that was the Black Skulls.
But should we mention like what part they played in the movie?
Yeah.
So they were, so at the beginning when we were first introduced to the cult members, and this is one of the cool things, they pulled out this horn called the Horn of Abraxas,
Mm-hmm.
and they used that to summon the Black Skull. So it goes back to that almost magical
Fantasy feeling to it.
to the
Yeah.
movie.
I also really like the sound design to that because like it was just like this little ocarina looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it just echoed like into the forest, it was just like really cool. It's like, man, I want to go do that in the middle of the woods sometime.
Yeah, and they summoned them, and I guess for them to do their dirty work, they'd have to give up a blood sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when they end up kidnapping Mandy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much the biggest role they play.
And well, that's enough of that. We don't want to give away too many details about the story. So now we're gonna move on to my favorite part, the technical stuff. So this movie had so much color in it. I mean, like so much, especially for a horror movie, and it was really beautiful. Honestly, like this, like the scenic views of like him driving home to his wife, like the beautiful forest scenery, and even his the area where he worked, like even it was like nothing but a bunch of falling trees. It was still beautiful to look at, and it was fairly, what it reminded me of was Mario Bava. And if you don't know who he is a Italian horror director, and one of his biggest traits was his use of color. And what he did with that color was more along the lines of painting a scene with it and helping to enhance the emotion that's going on. And I feel that Panos Cosmatos did the same thing. He used there was like a lot of blue greens, reds, and especially the bed, where they're sleeping in their bed, like in their bedroom. It was like that really beautiful night blue, because like I think their bedroom was like had full ceiling to floor windows, and like it let in a lot of like that night sky. It was really beautiful, and like I really loved that. And I'm guessing he used it the same way Mario Bava did.
As a sort of symbolism
Yeah,
device.
yeah, like especially with the Black Skulls, who we were just talking about earlier. A lot of like every time they would come on screen, especially when they were first introduced, it was like this bright red in the background. So like they were just like these silhouettes, and it was like that's what it made them really powerful. And in Mario's films, red usually represents danger. Or passion in some cases, but that would depend on the setup of the scene. But in this movie, it a lot of times it would represent that red, and it's like you can feel the danger just enhanced it almost. It was the other one. Oh, your favorite thing with like the Horn of Abraxas. And
Oh yeah, so they brought in two different infernal instruments. One of them was the Horn of Abraxas, and then the second one was this almost
a blade, which was called what the heck was it called? The Tainted Blade of the Pale Night.
Yeah.
And it was like this dagger with like a ball on it, like with an eyeball on it, which is also relevant because Mandy liked to read like these fantasy novels, and one of the books that she was reading before she was kidnapped was Speaker of the Serpent's Eye, and it kind of like symbolized that, I suppose. But yeah, every time like those mystical objects would come on, it would just have like this green flashing light
with this like jarring sound.
Yeah,
so awesome.
It was just awesome. It really like made it more fantasy that these objects were like otherworldly. There's like something not normal about them. I really like that. It really was put to use like very well. Like I know Crimson Peak did a thing with color, but I feel like this one did it really, really well. Like more than Crimson Peak did.
It was very neon.
Yeah, very neon. Yeah, like I really like the differences with the colors as well. Like there were a lot of warm reds for, you know, the cozy romantic feeling when he first got home to his wife, you know, having those very intimate moments with her. Um, oh, and the lighting when he's talking to his wife about her favorite things. Oh, it was just gorgeous.
The use of purples to show kind of like a sort of mysticism.
Oh yeah, like the purple lighting in the what the heck would you call it? Like a chapel, the cult's chapel. It was just it was gorgeous. It's just so much beautiful scenery. Like if you love color or you love like artsy type of movies.
Or ones have a lot of symbolism.
Yeah, a lot of symbolism. Like a lot, because trust me, everything in this movie practically connected with each other.
Oh yeah.
Like everything, like down to small details.
It was fun connecting it all.
It was. Like even very subtle details, like the symbol of light on the back of the jacket Nicolas Cage took from one of the Black Skulls after, you know, he enacted his revenge. Which is the it was like a symbol of light in the Bible, and that symbol of light is also the symbol for Lucifer before he fell. And I guess in a sense that kind of brings a feeling, or like the feeling that these bikers were like, you know, hell demons or something like that. Oh, what other moment? Oh, his wife's fate eyes were kind of freaky too.
Yeah. Looked like one of her pupils was bigger than the other.
Kind of freaky. And like, don't they say like when people have that, they kind of have like these abilities or something?
Oh yeah, to see magical creatures.
Yeah.
It used to be said if your pupil was bigger than the other, then you had the power to see the fae.
I feel like her power was like more of like premonitions or something, because her dreams are kind of like, would say something that would eventually happen in the future.
And then a lot of what she said also.
Yeah.
A lot of foretelling of what was going to happen.
Yeah, like that scene where Mandy was laughing at Jeremiah, and he tells her to say something, and she just laughs and just says the Reaper is coming, and that's also the name of the crossbow that Red's friend gives him to enact his revenge, which is also very interesting. But that's not on the technical side, but it's just a very interesting point. Yeah, just like the great use of color in this movie was just so good. Oh, the monster design was so good too. Like there's a lot of reference to Hellraiser with those monsters, which is also really neat. I mean, like their leather clad clothing was also super cool. Yeah.
And homages to other movies too.
Yeah.
Other horror movies from the 80s,
Yeah.
70s. Like, I don't know, I got some Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes and Friday the 13th vibes from this movie.
Yeah, because like wasn't the lake that they lived by called, what was it, Crystal Lake?
I think it was
Yeah.
Crystal Lake. And also there was this chainsaw battle going on.
Yeah. Which was kind of funny at first to me, because like here comes Nicolas Cage with his chainsaw, and then like the other bad guy, he just like stands up and like pulls out an even longer chainsaw. It was great. And that goes towards my favorite scene in that, but we'll get that towards the end of this podcast. But yeah, I think that's about it on the technical scene. I mean, like the shots were beautiful. The lighting was gorgeous. I mean, if you really want to see a movie scene painted with light, that is a movie you want to see. The music was also really good, very fitting, I think.
It sounded a lot like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Blade Runner, yeah. A lot of kind of machinery sounding.
Music.
Synthwave.
Yeah. Like almost reminiscent of 80s horror, kind of. Like late 80s probably. But oh, another thing to point out, like before we move on to the next topic, just a fun little fact. Mario Bava also did a movie called Black Sabbath, surprisingly, and you know, Black Sabbath is also a metal band, you know, and it kind of fits in with the whole theme of that. So, you know, just fun fact there. Anyway, time to move on. So our final thoughts on Mandy.
I guess we'll take it off. Well, I think this movie was probably one of the best horror movies I've seen in many, many years. I'm a big fan of the horror genre, and I've seen quite a few movies, and most of them either range from just bland, boring movies to just average.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this movie just stands at the very top. And honestly, it's become possibly my favorite movie in the genre. It was very different and weird. There weren't any jump scares.
No, there weren't any, but I think that's what made it really great because, in my opinion, jump scares feel really cheap to me. Like, it's just boom and done. You know, like it wears off after like a minute of that jump scare, but the feeling of unsettlingness that keeps going on in this, just like the suspense.
It's harder to do.
Yeah, it's really hard to do, and this movie did it really well. Also, the unsettling imagery in this movie was also what really impacted that. You know,
Yeah.
like the scene where Jeremiah is monologuing, when he starts getting really into it, it's just like this straight on face, and you know, just straight on staring at the camera, just like so unsettling, you know, and especially when it starts going, he's going further into it, and his face is just morphing into Mandy's face, and like even his mouth stops moving, but you can tell that he's still talking, and it just creates like this crazy trip feel.
Yeah. And my example of that was when Jeremiah first saw Mandy walking down the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this like after image of her, just like sort of like her in the corner, her face looking at him. And it's like completely red, and it's just her with this creepy, with her creepy face.
Yeah. Her
And
creepy face eyes.
It just sticks with you. Like, all of the scenes in this movie just stick with you, and you'll probably remember them better than you would any other horror movie that is out in the recent years.
Yeah, and I personally love this movie too. I do agree. It has like this very dreamlike feeling to it, and that's what I really like about it. Like, it has a lot of nostalgia, like a lot, and that's what I really love about it. Because like, remember when we saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 1970s movie version?
Oh yeah.
I had that same feeling, but not in the way that it reminds me of Chainsaw Massacre. It made me feel like I was watching Chainsaw Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it had a lot of that, like 1970s, 1980s classic horror movie type of feel. Like it had the bright red blood, it even had the graininess to it, and that's what I really like too. It's like they wanted it to look old, and they did it so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to agree. Like those images do stay with you. Like there were some animated sequences in this. And,
yeah, we didn't mention.
Yeah, which we didn't mention before, and we should have. But there were like the first animated scene, the one where like it's Mandy's dead corpse, just like it looks like she's staring off into the horizon, you know, it's like it's just her, and then she turns around and like her face slowly starts melting and like decomposing with maggots coming out of it and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, which also reminds me about the part where Red takes the LSD and his face melts like right on camera. That was so crazy.
Yeah.
That was trippy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was my thoughts on Mandy. Do you have a favorite scene though? I have to ask.
So my favorite scene in the entire movie was when Red was getting prepared for his revenge trip, and he was making this giant axe, and he was making it himself, and he was just pouring the liquid metal into the mold, and it had this really sick music going on in the background, and he had like these sunglasses on, and it was just a really cool scene.
Yeah. Oh my god, it was a really cool montage scene. The best. And like when you look at the sword, it kind of reminded me of Dark Souls. Like,
oh yeah.
Like yeah, or like what's it called? Bloodborne.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm gonna go kill myself some ghouls.
I mean, it kind of goes back to his job, too, because he does cut trees for a living.
Yeah.
And he's making a giant axe.
Yeah. He is a very handy guy.
Yeah.
Like a big man's man.
Yeah.
You know?
What about your favorite scene?
My favorite scene is a very small, simple scene.
What was it?
And it is after the chainsaw scene. Nicolas Cage just
Goes up? No, it was during.
No, it wasn't after the chainsaw scene. It was after he kills the other Black Skull.
The last one.
Yeah, the last one is the one he's gonna go kill, and he has like this epic fight scene, and he basically chops off his head at the end, and he lights the body on fire. And like Nicolas Cage is like all badass and he's covered in blood, right? And like he like sees his cigarette on the floor and he picks it up like all cool and everything. And he's like, "Oh, I gotta light the cigarette though." And so he's like, he looks around and like the severed head of the monster's like on fire. He like bends down, lights a cigarette on the head, and just takes a puff and walks away.
Yeah,
that's my favorite part. It's like Nicolas Cage like gone badass in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I would have done the same thing. And that was my favorite part. But yeah, would you recommend Mandy?
I would, to people who are fans of horror slasher films or death metal band fans. I think this is a movie that you'll either extreme love it or extreme hate it.
Yeah, because it did have that cult following.
It did. I think it's for a certain kind of audience, and I would recommend looking at the trailer first, and if you like the trailer, you'll probably end up liking the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you like classic horror movies. What was that other phrase? Grindhouse?
Yeah, Grindhouse.
Film? Yeah. Yeah. It's basically the best way to describe Mandy. It's like a classic horror feels with like Grindhouse. There was like another phrase I wanted to describe Mandy as, but I'm not sure how to properly phrase it. It had like this kind of rock opera fantasy type of feel that you would hear in like probably late 70s rock music, early 80s.
Didn't you say that a lot of death metal music had like stories to them?
Yeah, a lot of them do. Some of them do. But it's mostly a lot of late 1970s and early 1980s rock music, like metal music that had it more close to what I believe Mandy was trying to do, because it did have like that fantasy comic book feel to it, and that's what I really loved about it.
Dark fantasy.
Yeah, very dark fantasy, and I would fully recommend it. It for some people it may be a little bit of a slow burn at the beginning, but as soon as the title as soon as chapter 2 comes in, that's where it starts kicking off.
I think once the hour mark passes, because this is a 2-hour long movie, by the 1 hour mark, which I didn't even feel like
it did not feel like 2
an
hours.
Hour. By that 1 hour mark, that's when it gets going.
It gets crazy.
Yeah.
This movie was really fun. It was really, really fun. It's like I felt really good. Like I haven't felt that way about a horror movie in a long time. I think the last movie that actually made me feel something was probably Sinister.
Oh yeah. For me it was The Devil's Candy, but that was a while ago.
Yeah.
That was quite a while ago.
And 2 movies that we'll probably talk about in later podcasts, maybe. Probably. Yeah, because those are really good. I wouldn't mind watching those again. That was our review on Mandy. And thank you for joining us on the Ghoul Pals podcast. And I hope you all have a good night and see you next week.
Yeah.